Okay. So, hey everybody, welcome to the show. This is Drew Harris. I'm here today with Ben and Dylan, and we're Fractional Co-Pilot, helping fractional leaders learn the landscape and navigate it as we venture out into the world of the fractional space. So, Dylan, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, no, thanks, Drew. Appreciate it. Appreciate you and Ben having me on. So, been in the fractional ecosystem for about 9 months now, and I can get into my portfolio maybe at the end. But as a bit of background, I've been a creator economy and social media agency influencer marketing space for the last 13 years at two different firms. Most recently at a boutique influencer marketing agency called The Social Standard based out of Nashville. Joined that company as employee number 3 8 years ago and worked closely with the CEO to build it up to about a 20-person agency with big brand clients like Adobe, Stellantis, which is Ram, Fiat, Alfa Romeo, Chrysler, AT&T, and a whole host of other mid-sized clients and a handful of startups in there as well. We also managed large personalities on social media, people like Braden Sorbo on TikTok with a couple million followers, Demi Bagby with 22 million, world's largest female fitness influencer, Nick Luciano, who's the biggest TikTok cowboy. So have a lot of experience helping people who've acquired large audiences manage their business portfolios, their ventures, their own startup and brand ambitions, but most importantly, their negotiations with outside companies that want to work for them for sponsors, endorsements, or commercials. And prior to that was at a YouTube agency called Channel Factory. They're the world's largest YouTube agency, placing about $1.2 billion worth of Google spend per year across YouTube. And again, an early stage guy there. The first official salesperson started with the 19-year-old founder, Tony Chen, at the time in an apartment building in downtown LA. And by the time I left, we were up to about 38 million, and the rest is history. Before that was kind of my lead into the digital side. I launched a influencer agency before we really knew what that was. This was before Meta and before YouTube, if you could imagine that. So we were doing brand deals through celebrity news sites. So websites like TMZ, Us Weekly, People Magazine. We would work with brands, celebrities, influencers, and the paparazzi to stage branded scenarios and then distribute that media out via these large blogs. Sites like TMZ at the time used to get 38 million unique visitors per day before you could just pop up Instagram to see what celebrities were up to. And because of our relationship with those publishers, we could get hyperlinks in the comments or in the caption of the stories and drive massive amounts of traffic to different websites. So I've been doing the influencer marketing thing before it was really even, a word. Kind of just fell into it mainly from my prior career in the entertainment industry when I was actually shooting a pilot reality show about the paparazzi and kind of learned the business side of that and how much it was actually manipulated by outside entities, if you could believe that. And prior to that, did a bunch of things in the traditional entertainment business, such as financing a $7.5 million independent film called No God, No Master, which was about the bombing of the JP Morgan building in 1910, as told through the eyes of the very first head of the FBI, Bill Flynn, who was sent to infiltrate a communist network that some people say were responsible for that terrorist attack. And David Strathairn played the first head of the FBI, who was nominated for the Academy Award for Good Night and Good Luck, and was also produced by Tom DeSanto, who produced X-Men and Transformers. Produced on Oprah Winfrey's Big Give, was a development executive at a reality TV production company called Nash Entertainment, worked in the talent agencies at ICM, and then prior to that, started a PR firm with Howard Bragman, who was the legendary founder of the celebrity and brand public relations firm Bragman, Nyman, Caporelli, that was acquired by Interpublic about 23 years ago. Howard sadly passed away recently, but so yeah, I've had a kind of an expansive career, starting in the traditional entertainment industry, migrating my way to the digital side, much by hapstance and by accident, but was able to transition it and turn it into a pretty successful career in that space. And yeah, 9 months ago, I had a venture capital investment that I did 2 years ago, IPO, and I had a little bit of a little bit of powder in the keg, as they say. And I had been hearing a lot about this whole fractional ecosystem, and I felt, you know, to be a business owner, this was kind of the easiest, quickest way for me to go from a W-2 employee into owning my own business, which I've enjoyed a lot. Fractional work to me is not all that unsimilar to doing agency work, where every day you wake up, you deal with different clients with different marketing objectives and problems. You have to be a good time management, project management person, so you give everybody appropriate share of your time based on retainer size and hours and things like that. So it's been a pretty natural progression for me. Being a sales guy and generally working with early stage companies, I think the biggest challenge is that every client thinks you're still a full-time employee, and managing expectations around that part of it is probably the most challenging part. But whether you're an employee, whether you're working at an agency, or whether you're at a fractional, you're always going to have somebody to answer to, and people that have expectations. So yeah, I'm enjoying it. 9 months in so far, I was able to replace my income the first month, and I've had a couple of months where I've gone way above that and even considered scaling out. And there's feast and famine. There's an economy that's doing its thing right now. There's a lot of uncertainty out there. There's a lot of disruption through AI and downsizing and all that kind of stuff. But I think it's Warren Buffett that says, when people are scared, be greedy, and when people are greedy, be scared. So I try to look at every day as volatility means opportunity, is kind of how I approach things. So yeah, but thanks for having me on.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah, thanks for that intro, Dylan. Yeah, I'm Benjamin. I'm a fractional CMO. I help people who work in coaching, consulting, and also people who have courses basically monetize and get more traction in their business using paid ads, using organic social. And some of the clients I've worked with have somewhat kind of been similar to the people that it sounds like you've worked with, Dylan. I worked with a couple different influencer types: Nas Daily, Sarabeth Yoga, Kino Body. Nas Daily is probably the biggest one that I've worked with, but that's very interesting. So I'm curious about where the creator economy you think is going. Especially, you mentioned AI a little bit, and I've heard some crazy things where there's like AI influencers, people are getting AI girlfriends. Like it's this weird Wild West that I feel like we're in. And as someone like you who's seen this from pre-influencer to like AI influencer, where do you see things going? Like what is going to stick? What's going to get changed in the coming years, or where do you see things going there?
Yeah, it's a great question. I was at a conference in LA yesterday called Mark. I forget what it stands for, but it was mainly talking about the creator economy from the perspective of the affiliate side of the industry, which I think is really interesting. And I mentioned Adobe was my client for 8 years at my last agency, so I was pretty close to the production world, the world of high-end special effects and editing, digital avatars. They had a product called Puppetron, where you could basically take a cartoon, drop that inside of a Zoom call or a video square, and you could talk and move your hands, and it would make the puppet animate and move to your body language and face. And there have been the ideas of these digital influencers. It's not a new concept. People have been creating photorealistic digital characters since way before generative AI. I think the difference now is that everybody can create those, not just special effects houses, not just people who are really good at Adobe After Effects and Premiere. And, basically the technology is at the point where any of us could go and create, that level of video and special effects without any prior skills or knowledge. And I think that is very exciting and interesting. But I think the whole reason why influencers become influential is because they have something authentic and they have an authentic connection with their audiences versus a forced or superficial one. I think a common theme whenever I interview influencers and folks that want to work with me as a talent manager, I'm always very curious to hear their origin story. For one, it's a great what I would call kind of icebreaker moment to kind of have a client walk you through their ascension to social media stardom in their own words. It's a great way to build rapport and to build a relationship. And I am just curious as well. As someone who's been in this space for a long time, I like to, find out what those inflection point moments were for different creators and different people. And the one common thing that always rings true is that most influencers, they didn't set out to become influencers. They had a moment of virality because of something that they did on social media that had no intention of gaining fame or, they just created something and it connected with an audience and they woke up the next morning and they had millions of views or hundreds of thousands of followers. And then some people don't really do anything with that. Like they have a viral moment and they go back to their lives and they don't figure out how to capture on that. But smart ones take that moment and then they figure out, okay, what was interesting about that? What worked? And it makes them curious and hungry, almost like a dopamine hit to like do it again. And then those are the ones that become successful creators and successful influencers in my mind. And maybe that's the difference between like there's a lot of talk these days of like what's an influencer, what's a creator. I think a creator is somebody that creates content specifically for social media and for digital and for film, and then an audience kind of is attracted to that because of the quality of the content or the types of content that they create. And an influencer is probably somebody who has gained influence because they've become subject matter experts in something that has nothing to do with social media, and people want to follow them because they are interesting, like an Andrew Huberman or probably a Joe Rogan could even be considered that. If you think about like the rise of alternative media in the podcasting space, they did not intend to become social media famous. They just were comedians who started a podcast, or a college professor that started a podcast, or a athlete that is influential on social media because of the sport they play and the team that they play on at the level they compete. And I think there's a lot of that as well. So I know that was a bit of a long segue and a detour into your original question around the AI components. I think what AI is going to do is it's just going to continue to allow influencers to tell stories faster and better. But it's not going to replace the need for authentic connection between people over these social media platforms. It's not something that I've seen a machine be able to replicate yet. There's some really interesting content that gets generated by AI. Like go spend some time on X and just look at like X generative video, and like some of the stuff that comes out of there is like, it's fascinating, it's cool, but people know what it is. They're not really tricked by it yet. But it's moving so fast that that might be a different story in a year or less.
Totally. Yeah. One of my favorite AI videos I've seen was Harry Potter Balenciaga, where it was a whole bunch of Harry Potter characters walking down a runway in like different Balenciaga. It was ridiculous.
That's great.
Yeah. But I'm very, so yeah, thanks for that input. And it, basically to kind of consolidate, the key is the authenticity. That's kind
Yeah.
of like the main moat that AI is not able to bridge yet, is that whole idea that you can't really replace the quirkiness, the backstory, those inflection points you mentioned that these influencers might have versus a robot that just has a little bit of data and is trying to sound like that. So
Yeah, totally. And I think the best way to QA that is go spend time talking to any conversational AI tool. Like I was at an agency down in San Diego with a friend of mine, Dan KB, the CEO of Corton Avenue, and he's a LinkedIn influencer, and started an agency called Digitaria that then got acquired by WPP, and they rolled up like 150 agencies inside of the WPP umbrella. And he's always at the cutting edge of like what's new and what's cool. And he was showing me this conversational AI the other day, and it was novel. It was fun to like talk to, and they're starting to get better with like, the integration into like what I would call like slang and accent and inflection and tone. But it's still not quite there. It's still very much you're talking to a robot, and it feels like it's trying hard to fit in, for a lack of a better word. And if that's the level of intelligence, like I think you have to treat AI for what it is, which is an amazing research assistant. I definitely use it and trust it all the time for any kind of research project. It's an absolute amazing tool for fractionals in the world of like busy work and proposals. Like if a client asks me for a proposal that I think is kind of bullshit, and it's like, well, I can put something together for you, but I'd be kind of like pulling, numbers out of thin air. I'll just go to AI. Hey, generate a year one influencer marketing sales plan and show me the layout of the team that we need to hit, 10 million in revenue in the first year. Boom, it does it pretty damn good. And then you got to AI, in my opinion, it's always like a first draft, and then you have to go in and put in the fine touches. But for tasks that used to be like what I would consider kind of like busy work tasks, they were things that were needed, but they weren't necessary. Man, it cooks for that stuff. And on the creative side, I'm not as much of a video editor, but I still have a lot of friends that work at Adobe, and I had a buddy come to dinner in LA a couple of weeks ago and show me some of the stuff that they're able to generate, just with a single prompt on the video side. And it's getting wild. So, the idea of having to license B-roll, I think, is probably no longer a thing. Like if you're a video creator and you missed a shot, or you don't want to go to XYZ location to get a piece of B-roll, I mean, AI can generate net new content that's unique every time, right on cue. You don't need to license video footage anymore. So I think the idea of a stock library is probably gone. Now, where do those generative AI models, what do they train on? Probably stock libraries. So maybe that's how you compensate artists in the future, is not for their actual footage, but for the footage that they contribute to the model.
That's a good point.
Totally.
Yeah, I'll chime in here real quick about AI, because being a technologist, and focusing on software engineering, specifically in the product and engineering space, AI is such a big trend right now, and there's a lot of conversations happening around it. I heard an analogy recently, and I totally agree with this, is generally speaking, you use AI as a tool, and you have to know enough about what you're asking it to do to verify whether it's doing it well or not. For instance, in my world, you can't write a brand new computer application that works well with legacy code efficiently with AI. You can maybe write a brand new one, it'll get 80% there, but you still have to know enough to proof it. Like you were saying with like B-roll and this and that. I think you still need to be an expert in your field, and it will definitely accelerate the work that you do because it's a tool that, for instance, I can get something done in a few hours that with AI assistance that would previously take me like 2 days. So it definitely helps in that regard for sure. But I think the expertise that you mentioned is really key to using those tools effectively.
Yeah. And, I think that's why fractionals are going to continue to be in high demand and why more people are probably going to move to those models, right? Because if AI can get you 80% of the way there, but you need that 20% expertise to, make sure a campaign works or edit a video or build a piece of technology or a website or writes code or develop an MVP or build a presentation. I think that's actually a great thing because then we're not focusing on busy work. We're focusing on strategy and like deep learning and the things that actually matter. And
Right.
AI is kind of teeing things up. It's like having like a team of people that are like in the background as an investment banker, and they're getting the proposal ready for you. And you just got to come in and like do the presentation and knock the ball out of the park. And then hopefully the deal gets done. Right. So,
Yeah.
on the sell side, I've seen some pretty amazing stuff on the outreach side, like what I'll call like virtual SDRs, like, sites that you can drop your URL in, answer 4 questions, and it'll go find prospects, it'll email them, it'll book appointments, it'll just crush it. But then you look at the early stage sales agents, and it's like, hey, agent, go book 4 sales appointments or book an appointment. It's like that's not there yet at all. So it'll tell you what to go do, like theoretically, but I haven't seen it really, be at the level that it needs to be at from the business development side. And that's another, I think, I was definitely a little bit of a naysayer on AI in the sales profession at first because I was like, this is going to create more spam, more noise, make it harder to break through to get to decision makers. But what it really does is it does the heavy lifting, which is, of all the addressable people out there in the world that could be my customer, that's a lot of thinking and a lot of strategy. And sometimes that's required for a large organization that's doing like ABM level, like, hey, like your account is AT&T and that's the only account that you call into, and you got to be a subject matter expert on AT&T and the problems that they solve. But for me, a lot of times the clients that I'm working with are like, okay, we want to go work with travel advertisers and non-endemic brands that might be interested in the travel audience. Well, you've just opened up your aperture to a very huge pool of people and a huge pool of decision makers and a huge pool of buying committees. And, me as a sales guy, I could start with my Rolodex and my legacy relationships. And yes, that's going to be important. But for net new, why can't I just have an AI that's out there? They know what I have and they go and find the people that they think are the best potential fit, and they reach out and they give them a really custom pitch. And, it's not disingenuous because at the end of the day, all they're doing is getting me from, they're taking, like you said, they're taking time out of like, who am I going to reach out to? What is the email going to look like? How do I personalize it? How do I make it relevant to them? How do I get them to open? How do I get them to reply in the book? And now I can actually do the thing that salespeople actually are supposed to do, which is sadly get on Zoom calls, but in the old world, show up to an office, do a pitch, take somebody to lunch, take them out for a Laker game. The reality is if AI meets the promises of what it should do, it will actually give us more time for human interaction because it will be doing the busy work, that 80%, like you said, through it'll be doing that behind the scenes, which will free us up more for interhuman connection, which I think has gotten lost in the post world of COVID and work from home and all that silliness.
Yeah, I was talking with a friend of mine. I wanted to go back to something that you said earlier, and you and Ben were talking about the personal connection and how that's important, particularly like in the influencer world and the creator community and making that personal connection. I was talking with a friend of mine about AI specifically and how big of a deal it is, how many companies there are that are doing it. And, I had an actual business idea about doing something specific with AI to help people. And I was like, well, do you think this is a good idea? He was like, well, yeah, but eventually what's going to happen is, and he kind of went off on this tangent, there's going to be millions of choices because everybody's developing something in AI. So there's millions of choices. And how does somebody decide which AI to use or which this to use or which that to use? And in discussion with him, we came back to the fact that as humans, there's certain things that we value and we put higher value on different things as we make decisions. He was talking about a neuroscientist that he was talking with recently. Guy's really bright. And it was interesting because we came back to the fact that in the end, it's about that personal connection. Who are the people in your network that you trust to help you make decisions about whatever it is that you do, whether it's using a particular AI or, whatever the new latest thing is, who do you trust? And building that trust relationship is definitely a person to person thing versus a person to an AI thing. That's just my opinion. I'd love to hear y'all's thoughts on that.
No, I think you're right. I think, personal recommendation, especially in the world of business, is so important. When I find a tool that I love and that really has a net force multiplier on my productivity or my life, I scream from the rooftops about these things. I'll give you a couple of examples. There's one that I work with called Lucy Hub as a brand evangelist. And what Lucy Hub allows me to do is it's basically AI video editing, but it has human QA editors in the Philippines that do the final assembly, and then a US-based QA team that basically looks it over and makes sure that nothing got lost. So again, we talk about that component of AI will get you 80% there, but then you need a human to do the last touch. So for a very low cost, me as a sales guy or a business development guy, when I'm out in the field with an iPhone, I can shoot B-roll, I can shoot interview footage, I can shoot video content. And then with kind of a frame.io user experience, I can just click buttons, upload clips. And then by the time I get home, I have finished produced videos that I can upload to my LinkedIn or my social media. So what does that do? It allows a guy like me that's not a trained video editor to create really high level video content that looks at what influencers and what social media producers can do at a very low cost per video. But the other component is speed. Most of these creators are out in the world creating content during the day and then stuck in a hotel room at night editing, and then they don't get to actually experience the events that they go out and they cover and they're a part of because they're either shooting or editing. So by outsourcing the editing, but leveraging a cloud-based AI solution, I can get not only high quality without having the expertise, but I can also deliver the fastest. So an example of how this benefited me is I did a day one CES recap this year, got it out the second day of CES, and it got 80,000 video views and was probably the most traffic ever generated to my LinkedIn profile. This one video was responsible for a third of all of my LinkedIn traffic ever. And that was Like I've been publishing for 13 years on LinkedIn. So because I was fast and I got something out that was relevant, it wasn't even like crazy, interesting to me, to be honest. It just happened to be like speed. People were looking for LinkedIn. It caught the algorithm. Maybe it got featured in like some kind of a CES thing in LinkedIn, and it just took off. So yeah, and that was word of mouth, right? Like somebody told me about this little early stage company. I checked it out. I thought it was awesome. Started using it. Started working with them. There's this other really cool one called Vendolux, which they basically can tell you every conference happening in the entire world, but then they can tell you all the speakers, all the attendees, and all the sponsors. So if you're a guy like me that, your whole strategy is go to events, create content, do podcasts, do meetings at events. I try and go to an event every single week. This was like the greatest tool ever. And I don't have access to it right now. And it's like literally coming off heroin for a sales guy. But, that's the biggest problem that I face now is I go to a conference and I've got, unless I'm going to go hunt and peck on the speaker page, that's the only way to kind of bypass and get that level of sophistication, right? So I agree with you. I think word of mouth is going to be incredibly important as the ubiquitousness of AI tools, but also think about probably the next most important thing, which is brand, right? Like there's a reason I open up ChatGPT before anything else. Well, they had a Super Bowl ad and they're the name that I know. They're the name that I trust. So as the marketing guy, I'm going to say, yes, word of mouth is going to be really important, but also building a brand that people can trust and stands for something. And look, quite frankly, ChatGPT doesn't have a great brand in the community. Like there are lots of sketchy stories swirling around them. You've seen this weirdness between, they were a nonprofit, now they're a for-profit. The CEO was fired one day, then he was back the next. So there's definitely a lot of sketchiness around them that's not, lost on me in the ways that like it almost feels like a FTX Sam Bankman-Fried type situation where like, the lunatics are running the asylum and it's all going to break one day. But, that being said, they also are the ones that have done the best job getting their name out there ubiquitously as, oh, we're the AI tool. When you open up your phone, we're the app you should hit. And as a brand guy who doesn't know this space super well and doesn't know one AI from another, I'm going to go to the name that I know and the name that I trust. And a lot of this is Drew based on what you were saying, neuroprogramming. We like to think that we're really smart consumers. 92% of our buying decisions are made by the lizard brain, not the intelligent brain. Like just watch yourself as you're scrolling through TikTok and hitting TikTok shops, and watch yourself as you're using the seamless, frictionless experience of Amazon to order things, or even as the next time you approach the water case in a gas station, watch where your eyes go to, watch which brand you pull out, ask yourself the question of like, why am I grabbing Liquid Death or instead of Perrier? And is it because they entertained you, they made you laugh? Is it because their brand is etched on your frontal cortex because they get so much free exposure on LinkedIn and so much earned media? But most of our decisions are based on the neural programming that we have. Like also like I actually buy most of my clothes at thrift stores because I hate the whole like consumer economy, fast fashion, all that nonsense. But I'm still very picky about what brands. I'll go through the racks and like, oh, Patagonia, like they're cool. They do surfy stuff. They're about outdoor and lifestyle. But if I don't know the brand, I don't care if it looks good. I won't pick it up if I don't know who the brand is, because I'm like, I don't know anything about them. I'm not going to represent them, especially with something as intimate as like the clothes. You're basically a walking billboard for that brand.
Yeah, I was just thinking about that in my Adidas hat.
Mhm.
But I wanted to ask you a question. You kind of touched on personal connection being key in just a lot of things, all things in business, and then also that idea of brand being super important too, where brand creates that instant recognition, where your lizard brain is just kind of doing the work for you. And I was wondering, how can business owners or fractionals, this is like the
Yeah.
fractional co-pilot, so maybe let's focus it on the fractional side. How can fractional executives or leaders kind of leverage what like based on what about influencers and building brands? And influencers are masters at building personal connection and building brands, right? So what are kind of the secrets, if you will, that influencers use that maybe has not got landed in the fractional community, or that maybe most people in the fractional world are not doing to the best of their ability, or not doing these simple things that could really catapult their brand and catapult their business?
Yeah, I love that. I love that idea. Well, I think the first thing that we have to realize that whether we like it or not, we're all influencers. I have a podcast. You guys have a podcast. I have 31,000 followers on LinkedIn. I have a handful of followers across the rest of the platforms, but LinkedIn is the one that I program to and where I spend most of my time, and the one that I care about. So I'm constantly thinking about LinkedIn from the perspective of personal brand building and content creation versus what I used to think of it as, which is a giant repository of potential leads. I spend a lot more time on LinkedIn these days in a pull strategy versus a push strategy. I try and publish on LinkedIn every single day, definitely every single business day. And I try to make most of the posts video posts. So I think the first thing you have to do is that if you're going to be a fractional, unless you just want to, go old school and rely on your referral network, you have to build a personal brand, and you have to think of yourself as an influencer. And eventually you're probably going to have to think of yourself as a media business. Now, that being said, people have different levels of comfortableness with different ways of communicating as a creator or as a brand builder on LinkedIn. And some people are really good at writing posts. And quite frankly, I think that's what LinkedIn favors, at least at this moment. I don't like writing, so I don't write stuff as often. That's like my last resort, is I'll do a written post. But what I really love doing is talking to people. I love talking to other podcasters and doing other shows. I love having people on my shows. I love talking to people in the real world. I love talking to people on Zoom calls as a close second. So the format in which I'm most comfortable is video or audio, but 75% of all views now come from video. So if you're going to do podcast content, you might as well make sure you're set up for video. So I try and do a podcast every single day, every single business day on LinkedIn. I'm not always successful based on scheduling and client conflicts, but I do get quite a few done. And then the great thing about a podcast, as you guys probably already know, as you guys are exploring your podcast, is every successful podcast is 10, at minimum 10 cut downs for 60-second social videos. So this show or my show immediately goes to Lucy Hub. A day later, it starts spitting back 60-second short form clips. Those all go first on the LinkedIn as a vertical video with the full length episode in the comments. The next stop is, every vertical video platform that I can put it on: TikTok, Telegram, Snapchat, YouTube Shorts, Pinterest, I mean, I'm a big believer in posting across all platforms. And then that all those things cross-pollinate back to that. And then you're in this position where, you know, you're pulling people into your world based on giving them value, adding thought leadership to your ecosystem. And then the next thing you have to look at is just scale, right? Like, I think this week I did 6,000 impressions on LinkedIn. I was kind of a little bit of a quiet week for me with two-day trips to LA. But think about that number. 6,000 people within my network saw my content, opted into watching my content. I couldn't reach out to 6,000 people. I could maybe use some type of spam cannon strategy to reach out to 6,000 people. But I couldn't, you know, in any feasible, high touch, good way, reach out to 6,000 people. But 6,000 people decided to opt into that content today. So, you know, I think most of us, when we start off in the fractional space, or if we're start off on trying to get active on LinkedIn, we have this imposter syndrome thing of like, who am I? Who's going to care? You know, you feel like you don't have anything to offer, but everybody has something to offer. Everybody has a story. You know, it's one of my favorite books right now is this one, Tell to Win. It's an old book by Peter Guber, the founder of Mandalay Entertainment, and he's the co-owner of the Dodgers and a bunch of other cool stuff. But you know, at his base, that's at his core as an entertainment guy and a movie guy. Maybe that's where I get it. Story is first, you know, and if you look for stories in your life, you look for stories in your network, you bring people from your network into your world to tell stories. People don't care about infographics. They don't care about white papers. That stuff is important, but people don't, you can't data dump on people. You have to contextualize data in storytelling. And I think that's one of the things that the podcast format does so well, is it gives you that opportunity to have these long form conversations with people that can zig and zag in a million different directions. And it's just a great way to build your personal brand. Now, if you're a little shy, you don't like the camera, I would say get over it. Just get on and try it, because, you know, no one does it perfectly day one, but it's a muscle, it's exercise, it's reps. And the more you do it, the more you'll get comfortable with it. You know, there was a period of time where I definitely had butterflies before I went on shows or had people on, but I've interviewed Beyonce's dad. I've interviewed the Undersecretary of State under Trump's first term under Mike Pompeo, Keith Kroc, who's also the founder of DocuSign. Definitely had some heavy hitters on my show. And, you know, it just gets easier and easier. And it's a great way to create a massive amount of content fast and really fill your entire social media funnel with really relevant stuff. So that's a great way to build personal brands and to kind of act like an influencer without, you know, you don't have to, like I always tell people, I'm never going to be, you know, I'm not trying to be Joe Rogan. I'm not even trying to be Gary Vee. I'm just trying to pull my group of my ICP and my audience to me, and so I don't have to spend as much time pounding the pavement. And I can say, quite frankly, you know, for every client that I had from fractionals so far in the 9 months that I've been doing it, somehow found their way to me. And I can't always immediately attribute it to the podcast, but what I can tell you is people come out of the woodwork who I haven't talked to in years. And again, going back to that reptilian brain, why was I at the top? Why was I on the top of their mental Rolodex for XYZ, you know, opportunity or interaction? Why was I on their mind? When I go to conferences these days, people are always like, I know you from somewhere. Like, I'm like, well, you either think I look like Kyle MacLachlan or you've come across my podcast at some point. And they're like, oh yeah, I think it's the podcast, you know? So, so you do you do create brand awareness for you as an individual. Like if you're within an industry and your LinkedIn is very dialed within your ICP, everybody will see your face on a regular basis if you post often. So that's a big part. And then I would say one other strategy is don't be afraid of paid media. All of these platforms let you boost posts now. All of these algorithms are really good at finding people who are interested in specific pieces of content. So if you're going to invest in your business, where's your best return on spend is paid media. Like paid media basically gives you the opportunity to duplicate yourself across the internet to millions of people. And a lot of people are like, oh, why would I buy ads or why would I promote my social media posts? But it's a great way to scale because again, we go back to that idea of like, okay, I can talk to 600 people in a week. If I emailed, just went hammered emails, I could probably do 600 people. Through podcasting, I can reach 6,000 people. Through paid media, I can reach 60,000 people or 600,000 people or 6 million people. And it's not as expensive as it sounds.
Totally. I love, I've been using a lot of paid ads since I started in marketing. So it's great to hear someone else kind of putting it into context like that idea of like duplicating yourself across the internet kind of at will, as far as you're willing to invest in it. Right. Yeah, that's huge. And I know, amazing answer, by the way. I think that's very actionable for a lot of people, like investing in your brand, creating content, not expecting perfection right out of the gate, that it is a rep. So it's like, if you're out of shape content creation wise, you're going to feel sluggish. You're going to be like, oh man, this sucks. I want to quit. It's not great. But like you said, you build those reps, you get into like, it becomes a habit. It sounds like you got a pretty solid habit of posting daily, podcast daily, like becoming a content machine, but in your own niche, to where you're not trying to be everything to everyone. You're just being that one guy for a few people, which is awesome.
Yeah.
And as far as platforms go, you mentioned LinkedIn pretty heavily as kind of like your main go-to platform, but you also post on other platforms as well. Do you see
totally
that changing, or do you think LinkedIn is really the place to invest if you're in the industry that you're in?
Yeah, I think if you're a fractional, I think LinkedIn's probably where it's at. LinkedIn just released the ability to boost your own posts. I don't know if you've noticed that. Like prior, you had to tag a company, you had to do a thought leader ad. Now you can just boost your own post. So that's going to be pretty interesting. Like I want to test that feature so bad, but the LinkedIn CPMs are always like so, disheartening. But that's where the fish are, right? In the professional world. And that's where people are used to seeing a contextual business ad. But like, I just, whenever I do a LinkedIn media buy, then I look at the CPMs that I can get on, say, like even like Snapchat, like I'm on Snapchat. There are other business professionals on Snapchat. Yeah, there's a younger audience, but the CPMs are so cheap and the click-throughs are so cheap. I can get like a 2 cents cost per click. So if I send all that traffic at my podcast, yeah, maybe it's a little bit of like shooting a, pigeon with an elephant gun. But, LinkedIn, I think it's where people expect this type of content. It's where the world of the personal and the professional are interchanging and intertwining. And I think if you're a fractional, I think that's a really good place to start. But, I actually, when I'm not using Lucy Hub, I edit all my videos in TikTok. So I use TikTok as like my amateur editing studio because like if I go to an event, I can just shoot a bunch of like 3-second B-roll clips. I can do one little voiceover. I can pick a song. TikTok will edit it all to the song automatically. I can post it to TikTok, but then that exports to my camera roll and I can post that everywhere else. there is a vertical video format, which is pretty much everywhere, including like Facebook now, right? So, I'm a believer that like you should post everywhere, but you don't need to create net new content for every platform. Like create one vertical video, talk to your most active audience, which is probably going to be LinkedIn if you're going after fractional opportunities. And then, just put the rest of that stuff in, but just make sure you're everywhere. Why not? It's all like Gary Vee said it. It's never, because of TikTok and what TikTok did in the vertical video revolution and the movement from a follower-based economy to an algorithm-based economy, there's never been a better time to create content, whether you're a business owner, whether you're an aspiring creator, whether you're a fractional marketer, whatever you are. They've never been giving away audience at such a massive clip in the history of the world. And you would think that like, oh, I should have been early into social media 13 years ago. No, today is the opportunity for you to be the most successful in social media.
Wow, what a call to action. I like, if you're not creating content after that, I don't know what's going on. But that is amazing. Do you have anything else to add, Drew? I've been kind of monopolizing a little bit.
I was just gonna say, like, the just to reiterate some of the lessons that I took away from you, Dylan, were index towards action as a creator and push yourself out of your comfort zone, because you may not be comfortable in video, you may not be comfortable writing, but stick to where you're comfortable, at least initially, but then push yourself outside of that comfort zone and leverage as many tools as you can. You mentioned one. There's lots of tools out there. Ask your peers. Use your trusted network of people and ask them what tools they use for content creation. I'll put a pitch myself in here for a way that I do content, and this was a really great experience for me. We have this Fireflies AI note taker on the meeting with us. It's a very intelligent note taker, and I'm not affiliated with them. I'm not going to get any kickback from this one. Maybe I should become an affiliate because I'm such a big fan.
Yeah.
But nevertheless, it'll record video for you. So, it's really easy. It transcribes it. It takes notes. It creates a summary. It creates action items. It does a pretty good job. Plus, you can export that stuff pretty easily. So I've taken transcripts from, calls that I have with people, whether it's just a conversation or a podcast episode. Yesterday, I actually created a meeting. I put my note taker in there and I just talked to myself, talking about a business idea that I have. I exported the transcript, put it in another AI agent, and said, hey, write me up a business plan for this business idea that I have. Took that business plan, put it in another AI agent, and said, hey, do some deep research to do a competitive analysis on this for me. And it did that for me. And now I have a complete business plan and competitive analysis on what's already out there in the market for this business idea that I had. It took me maybe 2 hours total. Take me weeks, in other words. So I think that the tools are out there. You just got to figure out how to use them. And like Dylan said, definitely bias towards action, push yourself outside of your comfort zone, do the things that you need to do. So there's just a few takeaways that I had. I just wanted to share that with the audience because I thought it was helpful for sure. Thank you.
No, I love that. Yeah, I would say, you might not think of this from getting to know me or to after the conversation we have, but I'm what's called a introverted extrovert. I can turn it on pretty well, in a meeting. I'm really good in small groups. I really love people. I love one-on-one. I love small dinner parties. But, huge events and cocktail parties and conferences give me tons of social anxiety. And they suck the life out of me. I'm like, when I get back from a big conference, I'm actually drained and I need to like recharge. But if you think about the perspective of a professional content creater, one of the other things that I did in order to kind of supercharge my content. So the podcast is kind of like the in studio Zoom call version of content creation, and it serves a very specific goal. But the other side of my content is go out into the world, because, you know, if you think of like a travel influencer, what is a travel influencer doing? They're going places to show you cool things. Well, what's the version of that in the business world? It's conferences, it's trade shows, it's networking groups, it's, you know, MBA classes. So what I try and do is I try and go out into the real world to create content as much as possible. So again, going back to your idea of put yourself out of your comfort zone, you know, my default comfort zone is get up early, work out, stay in my office, don't leave the house.
Yeah, you
But
go to one conference a week, you know, you're
yeah,
really pushing
yeah,
yourself. You
it's
demonstrated that here.
totally, it's the my motto for 2025 was default go. I don't ask questions. If I get an opportunity, if I get into a conference as media through the podcast, which I do about half the time now, or if I'm invited to something, or if I find something local, just like, don't even give yourself the opportunity to ask, you know, should I or shouldn't I? Just default go. That'll put you in a lot more. If you operate from that posture of default go, you'll put yourself in a lot more interesting situations, not just from a content creator perspective, but an opportunity to meet cool people, learn about interesting stories, and build relationships.
Love it.
Yeah, that's so good. I feel like that could be a channel or a book or something. Default go.
We'll see. We'll see.
Build a brand around that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Get your hat. Default go.
I
That would be
know
sweet.
it's coming. It's coming. It's in the merch drop.
Amazing. Well, I don't know if what we're at on time, but I know I was late. So if we got to wrap things up, that's totally cool. But I learned so much, and I actually was looking up that Lucy Hub, LUCIHUB.com, right?
Yep.
For the videos, and I'm gonna check that out, because I think yeah, what we were talking about, just speed to content and just removing as much friction as possible. It just reduces the excuses, right? Like there's no reason where it's like, oh, you don't have to be a professional video editor. You don't need to hire one. There's tools. It's just about getting plugged into the right ones and then building out your workflow. So
Totally. It's all about, you know, outsourcing, right? Like you don't have to be a general expert at everything. I think that's the other great part about AI is providing the knowledge base of the world's best experts all at the palm of our fingertips. So do the thing that's your superpower. Don't get bogged down in the weeds as a content creator in the traditional frameworks of like, oh, I've got to learn Adobe Premiere and I've got to, you know, it's good to learn those things. Like I'm a decent novice at Adobe products, and I can get my way around them in a pinch. But do I want to spend 10 hours editing a podcast, or do I want to spend $100, you know, making sure that it's done professionally and fast? You know, that's the key. And there's between AI and outsourcing, it's just so easy to get the cost down to where it's just not worth your time anymore. If editing doesn't give you joy, if you're a guy that, you know, post-production and editing and doing special effects gives you joy and gives you energy, by all means, like get into the weeds and do it. But that's definitely not me. I don't enjoy that part of it. That's probably the worst part of it from my perspective. I like to be on the capture side, but not on the delivery side.
totally, I'm with you on that. Getting into the weeds, not my
Well,
idea of a
and
good time.
I think to our prospective clients who might be considering hiring a fractional leader, I think your point, Dylan, is a good one to them as well. Between outsourcing and, you know, hiring an experts and AI, those things can really accelerate your business, because fractionals, we have, you know, many years of experience, and we're not your employee. You don't have to worry about us. We're cheaper, you know, for what you're getting. And, you know, you have the power of AI at your fingertips too. So, I mean, you couple a fractional leader like one of us with the augmentation of AI can really accelerate your business. So just wanted to put that plug in there in case
I
we
love
get
it.
some watchers.
Yeah, I think it's smart. I think it's a smart thing to note. There's so many ways that being an entrepreneur, being a business owner is changing, and the toolkit is getting massive. And I think it's all headed in positive directions.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, thanks for coming on, Dylan.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Well,
sure.
always enjoy rapping with some fellow podcasters and especially some fellow fractionals. So I'll look forward to continuing to get to know you guys and hopefully collaborating in the future. And Ben, enjoy your national travels. I love the idea that you're doing the house swap travel circuit. My probably closest version of that was a couple of 5-week road trips in my RV around the country in the COVID era. Love traveling and working, and the just again, like, put yourself into interesting experiences, put yourself into interesting backdrops, and it'll make you a better content creator and expose you to different cultures and different neighborhoods and different regions. I'm jealous. That's a really